Hello, I'm glad you're here. I'm NatsMan, and I'm reading the Bible from the beginning to the end, from Genesis to Revelations. Please join me in this journey and make God's Word a part of your everyday life. Today's video is a recap summary video of the Second Samuel, the book of 2 Samuel. And it begins. The book of 2 Samuel continues the story of Israel's monarchy, picking it up right where 1 Samuel left off. It records David's rise to power as a king and his reign over Israel, his victories and failures, and the deep lessons about God's justice and mercy and covenant promises. The book begins with the news of Saul's death. David mourns deeply, showing honor to Saul and Jonathan, even though Saul had been his enemy, and after this David is anointed king, first over Judah in the city of Hebron, but Saul's son Ishbosheth is made king over the northern tribes by Abner, Saul's commander. For a time, the nation is divided. Conflict breaks out between David's men and Saul's house, but eventually Abner defects to David's side, Ishbosheth is assassinated, and with his death, David becomes king over all of Israel. David moves his capital to Jerusalem, capturing it from the Jebusites and making it both the political and spiritual center of the nation. He brings the Ark of the Covenant into Jerusalem with great celebration, marking the city as the dwelling place of God's presence. God makes a covenant with David, and one of the most important moments in 2 Samuel comes in chapter 7 when God makes a covenant with David. God promises that David's kingdom will endure forever and that one of his descendants will sit on the throne eternally. This is a turning point in biblical history, pointing directly to Jesus Christ, the Son of David, who would fulfill this everlasting kingdom. David's successes. For much of the book, David enjoys military success. He defeats the Philistines, the Moabites, the Edomites, the Ammonites, and Syrians, establishing Israel as a strong and respected nation. Under David's leadership, the kingdom grows in power and prosperity. But then the narrative takes a darker turn. In chapter 11, while his army is away at war, David commits adultery with Bathsheba, the wife of Uriah the Hittite. When Bathsheba becomes pregnant, David tries to cover it up and eventually has Uriah killed in battle. This sin displeases the Lord, and the prophet Nathan confronts David. David repents with deep sorrow, writing prayers of confession like Psalm 51, and God forgives him, but declares that the sword will never depart from his house. This prophecy plays out in heartbreaking ways. David's family is torn apart by violence, betrayal, and rebellion. David's son, Amnon, violates his half-sister Tamar, leading to hatred and revenge from her brother Absalom. Absalom kills Amnon, flees, and later returns, but he plots to steal the throne from his father. His rebellion gains momentum, and David is forced to flee Jerusalem. Eventually, though, Absalom is killed in battle, though David weeps bitterly over the loss of his son, crying, "O Absalom, my son, my son." David regains the throne, but his later years are marked by unrest, famine, and another rebellion by a man named Sheba. The kingdom remains intact, but David never fully escapes the consequences of his earlier sins. The final chapters of 2 Samuel include a mix of stories and reflections. David orders a census of the people, which angers God, leading to a plague. Yet even in judgment, God shows mercy. David buys land on Mount Moriah to build an altar to the Lord, land that would later become the site of the temple built by his son Solomon. The book closes with accounts of David's mighty men, his psalms of thanksgiving, and his recognition of God's faithful hand throughout his life. 2 Samuel is both inspiring and sobering. On one hand, it shows David as a man after God's own heart, courageous, faithful, and deeply devoted to the Lord. On the other, it shows the tragic consequences of sin, even for a great king. The book highlights God's justice, but also his mercy in forgiving David and keeping his covenant promise. Most importantly, 2 Samuel points forward to the greater king, Jesus Christ, who would come from David's line to establish an everlasting kingdom of righteousness and peace. In a closing thought, the book of 2 Samuel is the story of David's reign, his triumphs, his failures, and the enduring promise of God's kingdom. It reminds us that God works through imperfect people, that sin has real consequences, and that his promises never fail. And that was the book, the recap summary of the book, 2 Samuel. I'd like to thank you for joining me in this project, this endeavor to read the entire Bible. I hope you enjoyed listening as much as I enjoyed reading it. Please feel free to comment if you'd like, and also please subscribe and give this a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. If this is your first visit to NatsMan Reads the Bible, I leave a link in the description to the intro video that explains what we're working to accomplish here. I hope you come back for the next video, and until then, thank you. I hope you have a blessed day. I'm NatsMan, and I'm out.